Deion Sanders may have just spoiled where Shedeur Sanders is going to go in the NFL draft.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I'm your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. Joining me today is Ross Jackson. He knows all things NOLA, and he is the host of our Saints show. Ross, we have to talk about what Deion Sanders said because he's very calculated. I don't think he says things and doesn't mean them, or I don't think there's some connection between them. So if you don't know what I'm talking about and you're like, what is this guy rambling about? I'll give you some context. So on, I guess, Friday, Colorado had their 8 hard to find combine, which is a fancy way of saying a pro day. And just about every team was in attendance. NFL Network was there. And Deion Sanders made it a point on 2 separate occasions to talk about Colorado wearing black and gold or talk about teams wearing black and gold. And so after Field Yates made a reference to who was there, Coach Prime said, I got to end with this. I like these colors, referencing his hoodie. Do you like these colors? And Sanders turned to the camera and delivered the line again and said, I like these colors. I like these colors, with Louis Riddick kind of thrown in like a yeah or whatever, like a wink, wink kind of thing. To me, that screamed, I mean, there's only one NFL team with those colors, right? And that very much screamed to me like the Saints are now in the Shedeur Sanders sweepstakes. What do you think?
Yeah, like the Saints have the number 9 overall selection, and I'm sure all the folks that make you their first listen and that are your everydayers, they know that there's a good chance here that Sheduer Sanders could potentially slip to the top 10, right? To just like the back end of the top 10. And so that's puts the New Orleans Saints in perfect position. However, my thing with this when it comes to Deion is I think that Deion's comments are effectively ones that kind of prove that the Saints might be out. I don't think that they should be. But could potentially be out on Sheduer Sanders because draft secrets, or draft interests, as you know, like these are typically well-kept secrets by organizations. And so a Deion Sanders going out on ESPN and potentially spoiling the Saints draft secret feels like something that you wouldn't actually do if you were Deion Sanders, right? To be able to tell everybody in the entire world, hey, the Saints, without saying the Saints. But again, like you said, the black and gold connection and all those other things. So I think this is really about Deion trying to entice either the New York Giants to take him at 3, because if they want to wait until the second round, he's not going to be there. He's not making it past 9, black and gold, New Orleans Saints, or potentially trying to entice another team to try to trade up like the Pittsburgh Steelers, a la the Kansas City Chiefs years ago back in 2017 when they traded up ahead, or excuse me, 2018 when they traded up ahead. No, it was 2017, my bad, up ahead of the New Orleans Saints to take Patrick Mahomes. And so I think that's really the thing that I take away from with the Deion Sanders thing, because Kevin, I don't understand why you would otherwise go out there and spoil the secret for the New Orleans Saints if you're trying to maintain a relationship there in order to get your son drafted at 9. I think Deion's trying to stop the slide a little bit here.
Okay, I see that theory, and I raise you another conspiracy theory from my perspective.
Yes, let's do it. Tinfoil hats, man.
Deion Sanders is reading the writing on the wall, right? The Giants, who you mentioned, they signed Jameis, they signed Russ, they have Tommy DeVito, which Tommy DeVito is not really a factor, but he's a little cult hero over there in New Jersey. So they have 3 quarterbacks,
Tommy
right?
Cutlets.
Yes, Tommy Cutlets, of course, a little Italian signature move or whatever. I feel like that'd be the most toxic quarterback room imaginable if he were to go the Saints, or excuse me, the Giants. Because Coach Prime, this whole entire draft process, has talked about wanting Shedeur to go to a team that could develop quarterbacks and gives him a chance to be in the best situation. I don't think the Giants are. I went on Locked On the Giants show with Patricia, and I talked about this, and I was like, I don't think you guys are a fit anymore, because Russ is like, he thinks this is like, every year for Russ is like, this is my MVP year. Like that is his mindset. Jameis is a friendly guy. He also wants to start. And I also think he's very likable, which could be a problem for any quarterback in the room, right? If Russ wins the job, the locker room's probably going to like Jameis more than him anyway, right? And so as soon as Russ struggles, they're going to call for Jameis. So how does Shedeur fit into that? I don't know. The Browns, another team at 2, there's rumors of them being ready to tank for Arch Manning. We don't even know if Arch Manning's going to declare next year. And the Browns are like, we're done with this draft already. Like, we're kicking it on the quarterback. And so you just sort of run down the list. Like, the Seahawks have a Sam Darnold, the Jets signed Justin Fields. Maybe the Saints and Shedeur weren't that connected, and this is Coach Prime's way of sort of being like, hey, New Orleans Saints, take a look over here. We got a quarterback for you.
Yeah, I like that, right? It's about trying to call the attention of the Saints more
Mm,
than it is about trying to say, "Hey, I know something you don't know
yeah.
about the Saints and their interest in Shedeur Sanders." I'm totally down with that. I think that the Giants locker room, I agree with you on that. I think that the thing with the Browns too is that there's some rumors too that they might look to like take Abdul Carter at 2, the pass rusher out of Penn State, and then try to trade for Kirk Cousins or something
Mm.
like that. Because Atlanta's got to get Kirk Cousins out of their locker room. Like, you can't go into the whole, if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you've got no quarterback situation. That's what the Giants are about to do with Jameis and Russell Wilson. I know Russell Wilson's walking in and saying, I'm the starter, I'm the starter, I'm the starter, but everyone knows how this goes with Jameis. Everyone knows how this goes with Jameis. We've seen it everywhere. And so I agree with you that those aren't great landing spots, but I am curious about the opportunity for the Pittsburgh Steelers to look to move up and maybe land Shedeur, where I think that would be a great scenario for him. Probably assuming that Aaron Rodgers doesn't end up there. Maybe I feel a little bit differently if Aaron Rodgers does end up there. But I mean, him to be able to work with Mike Tomlin and everything like that and be in that Pittsburgh Steelers kind of atmosphere is one that I think makes sense. And so this enticing of like, hey, he's not going to make it past 9. So if you're going to get him, you got to make a move and all these other things. I could see that also being a part of the leverage. But I do buy the idea that he's calling the attention of the New Orleans Saints more than he is trying to say, hey, I know something you don't know.
Yeah, I just think, and this is the hard part with Deion Sanders, and I compare him to LeBron James quite frequently.
Same thing. Same thing.
Because it's like once LeBron throws out a tweet where it's like, I can't do this by myself. And it's like the trade deadline's approaching. Obviously, we all know that's him going, we need to make a move. Right. So
Right.
I don't think Deion Sanders says anything just for S and G's, if we're being realistic. The only problem is, and we'll end on this, Ross, before we go to the next segment, Shedeur Sanders and this quarterback class are not viewed as highly as past quarterback classes, right? Cam Ward, I saw, would be QB5 last year. And for reference, if you guys didn't know, there was 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round, tied a record. So I look at all these teams in the top 10, and outside of the Saints, all the teams that possibly could be an option for Shedeur, it feels like they all made a move to sort of give themselves a Band-Aid for this next year where they don't have to take a quarterback. And so is there any part of you that thinks Deion Sanders is maybe trying to stir up the Shedeur Sanders hype so he doesn't fall out of the first round, right? I know the Steelers are there at 21, but there's been some people who are like, he's not a first round pick. Teams are kind of planning otherwise. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that he's not a first round pick narrative is kind of BS, if I'm being completely honest with you. Like, there's usually only 9 or 10 guys every first round that actually have first round grades that get drafted, right? You're usually drafting quote unquote second round grades if you're drafting outside the top, let's say 12 or 13 picks in the first round. And so I don't buy he's not a first rounder, because yeah, he's a quarterback, and that's what it takes to be a first rounder sometimes. And hey, when you're a good quarterback like Sheduer Sanders is, let's not lose in this whole conversation that he is a good quarterback, a solid quarterback. And everybody talks about how he doesn't have like the elite physical trait. It's like, yeah, it's fine. Most quarterbacks don't.
He's not Patrick Mahomes, Ross.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
He's not Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, okay, well, if that's the threshold to be a first round quarterback, we'll never see another first round quarterback. Like, let's be real here. Right. And so I think that part of the narrative is BS. I'm glad that you challenged that as well. I think that when it comes to Shedeur, though, I don't think you're looking for a place that he can land in 2025 and be an immediate starter. In fact, New Orleans wouldn't even be that place. I mean, they're going to roll with Derek Carr for as many games as he's healthy in 2025, I imagine. They've restructured his contract. Very little opportunity to get away from that unless they trade him post June 1, which would be a big surprise, though not entirely impossible. But at the time of the draft, the expectation would be that he's landing somewhere where he gets 2025 to learn the system and develop, and then 2026 he can step into a starting role. I don't think that's exclusively I don't think that is non-inclusive of the New Orleans Saints. I think the Saints offer that same scenario.
Yeah, and I think Shedeur Sanders could learn a little something from sitting behind someone, right? I think that's a
100%.
valuable tool in college football and in the NFL, and we'll get to that in a little bit. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at TurboTax. This is a sponsor or a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting, worrying, and wondering some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get your most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on turbotax.com. Okay, I'm here with Ross of Locked On Saints, Ross Jackson, that is. Ross, let's talk about the fit for Shedeur Sanders to the Saints. We kind of just teased it a little. He needs to go somewhere where he shouldn't have to be the savior right away, right? I think that's sort of and I don't think people realize it, but I don't think it's common for rookie quarterbacks, or at least not right now, to come in and be the guy immediately, right? There's very few teams that try that. And we saw Caleb Williams, right? It didn't go as amazingly as we thought it would. We saw Bryce Young. He was like almost out of the league, it felt like, for like a few months. And then they gave him like a chance to sit behind Andy Dalton. It's like, oh, he learned something, right? So tell me about why you think Shedeur Sanders is such a good fit for the Saints.
Yeah, and I do think that there will be people that will also highlight that, well, Jaden Daniels did it, and it's like, okay, exceptions versus norm,
Yes.
right? And Jaden Daniels is an exception, and all these other guys. The fit in New Orleans makes perfect sense for him based on exactly the framework that you just laid out. He would get the opportunity to come in, and even if at some point during his rookie season he took the field, it wouldn't be right away, assuming that there's not some big surprise move for New Orleans where they do move off of Derek Carr after June 1st. And so for New Orleans, like the earliest that you might see him start is if Derek Carr suffers some kind of injury at some point during the season, and then he has the opportunity to go in. We saw that for Spencer Rattler last year, as well as Jake Haener last year and everything. And so there will be those opportunities. And again, or there might be those opportunities to get some playing time during his rookie season. But outside of that, really, it becomes about 2026 if you invest in him here in 2025. Because the other piece that's going on here in New Orleans is that they flipped their entire coaching staff this offseason. And look, they've got three solid developers. Kellen Moore, former quarterback, winningest quarterback in NCAA history over there with the Boise State Broncos. They've got Doug Nussmeier, who was an NFL quarterback as well. And then they've got Scott Tolzien as their quarterback coach, former NFL quarterback as well. So you've got this kind of triumvirate at the top of the offensive staff, including the play calling head coach in this scenario, that are all former quarterbacks. That's a good scenario for a young passer like a Shedeur Sanders, who lacks a physical trait, but still has like really, really good accuracy, great anticipation, good ball location, and all these other things. Like the physical trait that he has is throwing the football well. And I think that's a pretty good one when it comes to being a quarterback. And so I think that developmental opportunity is there for him for sure.
Yeah, I think the physical trait argument, like, it really came out of nowhere, honestly. It's like, it was like a couple
where
months
was
ago.
that? Where was that when it wasn't draft season, right?
Yeah, Mel Kiper was like, all of a sudden, it was like, teams don't like Shedeur because he's not Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. I mean, guess what? You name three people, there's not many of them, right?
Right.
I think Jaden Daniels, like you mentioned, rare exception, right? Jaden Daniels was a guy who, he honestly, had Jaden Daniels gone to the NFL the year before, he's probably a 4th-round pick, right? He was not going to be the Jaden Daniels we know. He struggled at Arizona State. He was kind of looking like a bust of a recruit. I'm sure we all remember the video of when he transferred and his teammates were taking stuff out of his locker and saying he sucked, right? So a lot can happen. And plus, Jaden Daniels is like my age and he's a rookie, right? I think he was 25. So he's older for a rookie. Shedeur Sanders spent 4 years in college. That being said, I feel like people during draft season, it's like we look really hard for, there's three things, right? There's mock drafts where it's like, this is what I think it's going to happen. There's mock drafts where it's, I want to be edgy. And then there's mock drafts where it's like, I just lost my mind. And I think people started to get to this. Well, it's like all of a sudden Shedeur's fallen to the 3rd round, right? It's like, okay, people need a quarterback. Someone's going to take him regardless. And I think his tools that are being overlooked are his toughness, right? He was sacked 94 times in 2 years at Colorado. He's very smart with the football. He rarely makes mistakes. I think this past year he completed 74% of his passes, which was a FBS record.
Wow.
And the interceptions he did throw, some of them were the most random things I've ever seen. There was one against North Dakota State where like a defender had fallen down and the ball hit his foot and like went up to his teammate. Like it was stuff like that where it's like, that's not on Shedeur. That's just the man upstairs has been like, hey, I wanted to have a little fun today. Right. And so we can't hold these physical traits of Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson. We can't hold that standard to everyone because it's a rare standard. The other thing that I like about the Saints, and Ross, I want you to jump on this as well. Mm-hmm. The coaching staff is, and you mentioned they're all very quarterback friendly. The coaching staff has leeway, right? I look at it like the Giants, right? They wanted to force Shedeur to the Giants, and it's like Brian Daboll, Joe Shane, they're a year away, probably not even a year away. They're probably in this year of like coaching for their job, general managing for their job, right? The Browns, right? If they do struggle, how much leeway are they going to get, right? Mm-hmm. Kellen Moore, this is his first head coaching job. And I think having a young head coach, although it's kind of like, ooh, can he develop a quarterback as a head coach? We'll find that out, right? But I think it gives some comfort, right? Because the quarterbacks that have to go into a situation and they, like Caleb Williams, who has 2 head coaches or 3 head coaches now, it's a little dicey.
Yeah, there's kind of a two-way street here for sure, but I think your side of the street is 70% of what everybody's on, right? Like it is this opportunity where you come in with a young head coach who has leeway and who right now doesn't have his hand-picked quarterback, right? And so you get drafted by Kellen Moore, you're probably getting 3 to 4 seasons with Kellen Moore unless things go catastrophically bad from like a personal perspective, not necessarily like a football perspective. Right, exactly. Yeah, you run around kicking kickers and all this other stuff. And look, I've talked to Kellen Moore several times. He ain't kicking nobody. Like he's the nicest dude in the entire world.
Breaking news, according to sources.
Yeah, right. Yeah, according to sources, Kellen Moore, friendly guy. And so the other side of the road is that you're tied to the head coach. And so if something does happen with that head coach, you run the risk of also being out when the new coaching staff comes in. And so you're hoping that the other coach comes in and likes you too. But that's not the same as being out. It's just there's some suspense if a coaching change happens. That's really all that it is. So if you go out there and you prove that, right. Yeah. You go out there and prove that you can. Yep. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And so if you go out there in the time that you are with your guy and you prove that you can be anybody's guy, then great. I think Shedeur has the capabilities to do that. And I also think like working under Derek Carr is not the worst thing in the world either. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Cause I think, especially nowadays with quarterbacks, and like I feel like it's social media driven, honestly, where it's like this guy goes to this team and like he has so many Twitter followers or so many people are posting about him. It's like we have to start, or like this guy has to start. But I feel like it's really not a bad thing to learn behind someone. So talk about that Derek Carr Shedeur relationship, because there has been quarterbacks in the past, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and other names. Or guys who have said they don't feel like they need to mentor young guys. Do you think Derek Carr would be a good mentor for Shedeur?
Yeah, I do. And look, I think a lot of Saints fans would probably hate to hear me say that because Derek Carr is so on the outs here in New Orleans, and all of it makes sense. Don't get me wrong. But look, he's done it for Jake Haener for 2 years. He did it for Spencer Rattler last year. Like every one of these guys that I talked to, and in every environment, like they praise this guy for teaching and having the conversations and doing all these extracurriculars and working with them and all this other stuff and everything. And the way that the Saints typically structure stuff is that they kind of ensure that by effectively making the backup quarterback, giving the backup quarterbacks responsibilities that help the starting quarterback. So they put you in position to be the right-hand man to the starting quarterback immediately. So they make it a part of their structure. Like you don't really have an option as a starting quarterback to not mentor the young guys. The Saints make it a part of what it is that they do from an organizational side because they see the value in a developing young quarterback. You want your backup quarterback to be ready to go in. You want them to know the defense, all these other things. And one thing that Kellen Moore told me when I talked to him during the owners meeting a couple of weeks ago, earlier this week, last week, goodness, that was only a week ago. It feels like that was forever ago. But he said like OTAs, training camp, preseason, there will be a competition for who's the backup quarterback behind Derek Carr, and whoever that backup quarterback is, they will be committed to before the season begins. And I think that's a very comfortable situation for a young starter, or excuse me, a young backup or a young rookie to come into, so that there's not question marks during the regular season. The Saints did that with Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener last year. It did not work. You don't want that competition to rage on throughout the year, because you have, this many, like, and I'm making very small hand gestures here, but this many, available practice snaps during the regular season. You want those to go to the backup quarterback that's actually the guy. And so Kellen Moore will be very specific and deliberate about who that quarterback is and put them in a position to develop.
Yeah, I think that's honestly, it sounds so profound, but like NFL teams around the league like would not do that, right? Certain teams,
it's not a given.
Yeah, certain teams you could tell who like put their backups in position to succeed, and then there's teams where it's like, dust off Taylor Heineke and get him out here because we need someone who's not a starter, right? That's what it feels like. And Taylor Heineke even has that vibe to him as well. So final question, or final two questions before we move on. One, I wanted to touch on the weapons that they have over in New Orleans, because I feel like that could also help a quarterback like Shedeur, who lacks, quote unquote, the physical traits, right? He has Alvin Kamara and all those guys. So talk about the weapons and how they can make him succeed and help him.
Yeah, a lot of speed, which I think is great, right? And it's an offense that's going to ask you to throw to a spot, not to a moving body. And so I think that those things are comfortable for young passers. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, now Brandon Cooks, a ton of speed there. Chris Olave can run every route in the books. Not a lot of yards after catch guys, so maybe the Saints could make some advancements there, and not a lot of big bodied pass catchers. So another place where they might look to make an advancement in this year's draft, but lots of those guys available, not just in the first round, but beyond. And then when you have an Alvin Kamara that you can make the right choice and check down to, who can turn, that's your yards after catch guy. He can turn the 3-yard dump off into a 16-yard gain or whatever, and that helps your offense move, right? If you can gain 4 yards on every passing play in your throughout your game, you're probably winning that football game. You know what I mean? And those guys give you the opportunity to do that. I think tight end is the place where they might still be able to also make some strides. But once they're able to do that, I think that's one of those things where you get the tight end in, and that might be next year, we'll see. But you get that other tight end in, and that ends up being that young quarterback's best friend.
There could be worse situations to go into in terms of weapons than New Orleans, for sure.
Easily.
Final question before Ross departs us. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least likely, 10 being the most likely, how likely do you think it is that Sheduer Sanders is in the black and gold next year as a Saint? So,
understanding that there are so many different scenarios, it would be very hard for me to go above a 5. So when I give this rating, it's really out of the 5 more than it is out of the 10, but it is a 10-point scale because there's so many things that are possible. But the draft just has so many twists and turns and things like that. After Deion's comments, and Kevin, you impacted me a little bit here. After Deion's comments, which backed me up a little bit, I'd probably go to like a 3.5, 4. Is where I am. And so when you think about all the things that can happen in the draft, 35 to 40% is pretty sizable. And so I'm still kind of in favor of it. I think the Saints should draft him if he's there at 9, or if they have an opportunity to even trade back into the first round and get him or something like that. But I think Deion's trying to sell something here to other teams that aren't actually the ones in those colors that he mentioned. But we'll see how it plays out.
Okay, I'm going to add another rating question because you kind of hit on something that I've been thinking about.
Okay.
What if the Saints at 9 go, say, whatever need, offensive lineman, receiver, whatever it is, right?
Right.
What are the chances 1 to 10 that if Shedeur falls, the Saints make a move? Are they an aggressive franchise? Do they trade back in? What is the chances they trade back into the first and get Shedeur, say late in the 20s or something?
Yeah, very aggressive franchise, especially when it comes to trading. General manager Mickey Loomis loves it. He loves to trade up and go and get his guy. If Sheduer Sanders is their guy, and he's available, let's say, past the Steelers into the late 20s, everything like that, a la Lamar Jackson years ago in 2018, the Baltimore Ravens trading up into the first round, I could absolutely see it happening. Again, so many different scenarios. And so I'd probably put it at a 50-50 situation there, which is pretty solid when it comes to the draft. But I could absolutely see the Saints trading back up into the first round to either take him or if they like another quarterback in that range that falls. But if he's there, it's hard for him not to be that guy, I imagine.
Perfect. Okay. He's Ross Jackson. Ross, tell the people where they can find you and what you're working on. So that way they know where they could go to get possible Shedeur Sanders coverage next year. And of
Yeah,
course, the
right.
Saints coverage.
Of course. Yeah. You can find Locked On Saints just like you find Locked On Buffs here, wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube free every single day. And of course, you can find all the written work over at louisianasports.net. You can find it all in one place on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson NOLA, NOLA.
When we come back, we're going to be talking about all things Colorado transfers. They need to make some moves. This episode of Locked On Buffs is also brought to you by our sponsors over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. It's an easy collaboration process. Managing money with your partners smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you don't miss out on a moment of the coverage. I appreciate you guys for talking NFL with me and Ross Jackson, because obviously Shedeur Sanders, I think, is going to be one of the most polarizing prospects in this class. And of course, where he's going is going to be a mystery. I think it's going to be one of the biggest mysteries for sure, because one, there's his father. Two, it's like, okay, we don't need a quarterback here. We need a quarterback here, blah, blah, blah. This quarterback class is weak. There's a lot of reasons for teams to be skeptical about quarterbacks in this class in particular. And he's obviously one of the most popular players college football has ever seen. So there's always that. I was going to say when we come back, we're back, baby. We're talking about what Colorado needs in the portal. The portal ends at the end of this month-ish. And I'm looking at this roster, and I think Coach Prime and company, I think they did a really good job of building the roster where they could, addressing needs where they could. That being said, I still think you could make an argument that a couple of these positions could use some more depth, starting with receiver. Obviously, Sincere Brown is in the mix. I still think they should go after Stanford's Emmett Mosley. Whether or not they will, that's TBD. But I think another receiver doesn't hurt, because you're looking at the receiver core right now. Omarion Miller, he's got some experience, dealt with some injuries. Joseph Williams, true sophomore, he's pretty good. I think he'll sort of be the leader of this group. Draylon Miller, sophomore. And then you have Quanell Farrakhan, Adrian Wilson, Quinn Gibson, they're all freshmen. Cam Kell, freshman. I don't think he played much, if at all, last year. Terrell Timmons, haven't seen much of him. So realistically, you have three guys with experience, and then the other five are relatively inexperienced or unproven. So, and even then, I think you can make the argument that seven of your receivers, not counting Joseph Williams, are unproven. So I think you go get another receiver, right? I think that doesn't hurt. You also, maybe if there's a nice running back in the portal that you could add, I feel like that could be a position of need depending on what they do with Cam. Just because they have three, right? You have Isaiah Gustav, Micah Welch, Dallin Hayden. What if someone gets injured, right? What if someone goes down, all of a sudden you're down to two, and then we're back in that Charlie Offerdahl situation. So I think you go receiver, running back. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Linebacker-wise, I still think we could get a little more here and there, right? I like Reginald Hughes. I like Martavius French as the top two guys. That being said, where do you go after them, right? You have Jalen Wester, but is he what they need? Is he the answer to all the problems? I don't know. I think there's a lot of discussions to be had about that linebacker room. It kind of reminds me of last year, where I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of shocked me and end up being one of the best units on the team, but it also wouldn't shock me if they are a weakness of the team because of lack of depth. And then the final position is safety, right? I think you need another safety to go with Taufik Bayard, right? You just look at what they have at safety. They have Taufik, Savion Riley. I like those two guys, right? But then it's Carter Stottmeyer, who he's done okay. And then Makari Vickers, who had a pretty major surgery not too long ago. And so it's like, okay, Do we ride with those 3-4 guys and hope that everything's okay? They also have Ben Finiseth, who's an OB original buff. Do they ride with them, or do they bring in just an extra body just to be safe? Right. I lean towards being safe, so that way you don't have to worry about depth, because at the end of the day, everyone could say, oh, this guy's really good or that guy's really good. If you don't have depth, it doesn't matter, because injuries happen, suspensions happen. Not that any of these guys would get suspended, but you never know, right? Suspensions happen all the time. So you just have to be ready, right? You have to be ready for any and everything. And I think that's what Colorado needs in the transfer portal. That's a pretty good problem to have when you're just looking for depth pieces. But the way Coach Prime and his staff have built this roster, I mean, they set themselves up to succeed. So that's what I think about the portal. You guys comment below. Let me know what you think the Buffs need to do. Appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. So make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. And I will see you guys tomorrow.